how it's designed. We'll talk about passing the CISSP. We'll talk a little bit about this book here. We'll talk about, and then we're going to go through a presentation that I give kind of all the time. I just gave it to the North Dakota Cybersecurity Conference. So I gave it to a bunch of information security people who have, a bunch of experience, but I continually go through the same thing. So, but it's a good segue into chapter 2 when we get there. So it's always a little awkward when you do the class online because I don't get to see you. I'm one of those guys where I really like to interact. I like to see people, face to face. I like facial expressions. I love questions. If you do have questions during the class, there's a chat window. So if you go, I don't know what it's, if you go more, there's a chat button. So if you open up the chat window, you'll kind of see the room chat of what's going on and questions that people are asking. You can send questions like Rick just did to me privately. So if there's a question you want to ask that you don't want to ask to everybody, you can, ask those questions privately, and then I'll address them. If I don't get to everybody's questions, right now we have almost 60 people. I think there are 80 people that are signed up for the class, so I may not be able to get to all the questions. Okay. So we'll deal with that. Questions that I don't get to, I will try to follow up an email later, and we'll also give you the ability to send those questions to Rob, and he can make sure that you get the right answer. The CISSP, for those of you who haven't been down this road before, there's a lot of material. It's a lot of memorization. Some of it isn't the most exciting stuff in the world. So we're going to try to make this fun. People who know me personally know that two things about me, I think. One is I typically call things the way I see them. And two, I'm not very politically correct. So as we go through this class, we're going to try to make things fun. But, sometimes when you make things fun, people get offended. So hopefully that doesn't happen here. If you do get offended, no offense. So let's get started. I've got some slides prepared for today. First is just an introduction to the CISSP Mentor Program. The first time we did this was 2010. We had 6 students, the 6 students that were chosen for the Mentor Program. At first, it was really kind of an exclusive thing. So the 6 people that we had in that first class were people that we knew. And we went through, I think there were 30 or so people that applied for that class. We only chose 6 of them. We did it all in person. And at the end of the day, all 6 of those people passed their CISSP, and they all have good information security careers today. Good friends, and it's really been fun to be a part of it. It's been kind of a humbling experience. Today's class, we have 80 students who are signed up. We don't necessarily really qualify people, so having said that, we have 80 students today. I'm assuming 20 or so will probably drop by the time we get halfway through the class, and I'll be surprised if we have more than half of the people that are here today still with us at the end. And it's not because, hopefully it's not because of the poor instruction. Hopefully it's instead, there's just so much information for people to take in. They say it's a mile wide and an inch deep, or 2 inches deep, because it is a lot of information, a lot of memorization. A lot of the stuff that you go through in the CISSP, you'll also be able to kind of get rid of because you don't necessarily use a lot of this stuff in the actual work we do. It's a little better now that they've reorganized the class. So there used to be 10 domains. Now there's 8. They did that in April of last year. It's a little more relevant today, so that's a good thing. Why we do this? So we do the mentor program because we're a company that really is striving to change the broken industry. We started back when in our first class in 2010, we had 3 employees. Today we have 28 employees, and I really get the privilege of working with some of the best people in our industry. The reason why we do it is we want to keep building good security people. In the work that I do, I'm in Rochester today and for the rest of this week. And I'm working with information security executives of some pretty large companies, helping them build good security programs. And one thing that's I see over and over again, and I have plenty of examples, is there's just not enough good security people in our industry. We continually miss the basics. We continually kind of chase after these shiny objects. And I've got plenty of examples for that too. But the reason why we do it is we really want to build good security people. And I'm hoping that a good number of you who have an interest in either starting a career in security or taking your career further, that this is something that helps with that. Success stories today, I would say, of the people that have actually taken the exam, not everybody does after they get through this program. 90+% pass the test on the first pass. But of like I was saying earlier, we have 80 students today. I'm guessing 40-ish might be with us at the end of the class. So of people that actually start the CISSP Mentor Program and go all the way through and get their CISSP, the percentage is much lower. But if you stick with it, even people that are non-technical or people that have no experience in information security, stick to it. It's not as difficult as it seems. So, keep doing it. And it is free. So we're not, I guess we really can't give you any money back, but that's kind of a joke. That's my security humor. So we do need more information security people. Ideal. This comes right off of the FRSecure website. So for those of you who've never even researched what the CISSP is, it's put on by the International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium, which is ISC². And from their website, which is www.isc2.org, this is what they say the CISSP is really meant for. Security consultants, managers, IT directors, security auditors. Really, it's the gold standard for information security. I'd say most people in our industry have a CISSP at a minimum. So it does lend some credibility. But just like any certification, just having a CISSP I don't think makes you a good security person. You really have to work at it. That's a picture there of a guy who's not a good security person. At least right there, he's not. Typical class structure. So each class will kind of follow this same format. We'll just recap previous content, especially when we go from the Thursday to Tuesday. If you're at all like me, over the weekend, I kind of forget the things that I did last week. So we'll recap what we did in the previous class. We'll go over the questions. So the questions that I didn't get to during class, or the questions that were sent between classes, we'll cover some of those. The ones I think that are really relevant to everybody, we'll address those. We'll start just about every class with a quiz. We didn't start this class with a quiz, and we won't start the next one, but ones after that we will. And the quiz is good just to help us with our retention of the things that we memorized in the previous class. We'll talk about some current events. So in between classes, I'll be looking for things that really drive home some points that we tried to make in the previous class, and we'll kind of discuss those. Those are really kind of fun. The company that I'm working with today, one of the struggles that they're having is executive management, just as an example of kind of current events and how we use these. Executive management is not getting the right picture of what's truly happening with information security and the rest of the organization. And that's very common. So it was kind of cool to share, how in the Target breach, for people that were that are familiar with what took place there and kind of what happened. But that was a similar problem in the Target breach. And so it was neat to be able to talk about how that can be a big deal if executive management isn't getting really the real deal or the true story. And we get paid as information security consultants to tell people the truth. And a lot of times we're telling them things that they probably don't want to hear, but it helps them. So current events, we'll talk about that. Lecture, which to me is kind of the most boring part, but it's probably the part you guys want. Where it's me talking. Online classes are always a struggle for me because I don't get any input So I feel like I'm just sitting here talking to a machine. So we'll go through the lecture. We'll cover the current topic, and then we'll give out a homework assignment. And yeah, we will have a lot of homework. Like I said, a lot of this is memorization. So just going over it in class will help drive home some of the concepts. It'll help connect some of the things. But at the end of the day, you're going to need to read and memorize. So anyway, typical class structure. I said this already. We will try to get to all the questions during class. I love questions. There are some dumb questions, but no bad questions. So if you have any questions, please ask them. I also like being challenged. I think that when you ask me a question that's a challenging one, or challenging a concept that maybe that I put out to you guys, that's good, because it helps me. It means that I need to defend kind of where I'm coming from when I made the comment or the thing that I said. But it also helps to drive home a point for you. So it makes us both good, better security people when you ask questions. So please do that. Rob, I didn't even tell Rob that this was going to happen before the class because he didn't get to see my slides. But if you have questions between classes, you get to email Rob. So you're welcome, Rob. We will soon. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to do it and how we're going to facilitate it. I think one of the things I see a lot is people will go through the mentor program and then they'll put their book down and they won't. So they kind of take this pause after they're done with the class, and then they don't take the test. They don't go back to the book. They don't really get that next step in their preparation for the exam. So we are going to try to figure out a way to facilitate a study group to make sure that those things don't happen, so that you have a resource that you can go to that doesn't have to be us. You can always come to us, but sometimes it's better as peers to talk about stuff. And the content, we will make that available, including these slides. I don't know, Rob, if you're doing any recording of the class. We are doing recording. So if you want the content of the class, let us know, and we'll make it available to you so that you can use it in your studies or share it, do whatever you want with it. So the CISSP, what is the CISSP? I took the class. I actually didn't take a class. I passed my CISSP in 2005, I think. A lot of things have changed since the time I took the test. I think it's important for you to tell you that because the test has changed. So when I tell you about my experience in going through the CISSP, there are some things that are a lot different today. So just about what the CISSP is, it stands for the Certified Information System Security Professional. If you're new to information security or new to IT, get prepared for a bunch of acronyms. So CISSP is just another one of those acronyms put on by the ISC Squared. So the ISC Squared maintains the certification as well as a number of other certifications. There are some more focused certifications on specific industries or specific disciplines. So if you wanted to go from a CISSP to, what's my next step, which is, common, there's others that you can take and pass. What it really is testing your knowledge of the common body of knowledge, or sometimes referred to as the CBK. You'll have to memorize it. A lot of things will be new concepts. I don't know how many times I've said memorize, but I guess, there's a reason why I keep saying it. You really do have to memorize a lot of the information. Now, when you do the things that you do in information security, there are a lot of things in the CBK that I don't really practice on a daily basis. It's usually because I have a different specialty. I work on a different part of information security. So when you become a CISSP and it looks so overwhelming with all these things that you need to memorize, when you get to and you have a job in information security, you're not going to be doing all of that. You can't be an expert in all of this. So pick what parts of security really pique your interest and really focus on being an expert in those things. A mile wide, 2 inches deep. So we're not going to get really technical in any part of information security. This drives the penetration tester hacker types crazy because they like to dig deep. We're not going to do that in this class, and you don't need to do it for the CISSP. So a lot of concepts, a lot of putting things together, but we're not going to hack anything in this class. 2015 CBK. So when I took the class, it was a much different CBK, much different common body of knowledge. The good thing is, I think the common body of knowledge that we were using before April 2015 was not very relevant. We were referring to things that aren't in use anymore. Things like, if you've studied that CBK, things like the rainbow series, PNI, orange book, red book, governmental things, that none of that stuff is used anymore. So we're not going to talk about any of that stuff. The 2015 CBK is much better, I think, much more applicable to what we actually do. The good thing about that is that, and the bad thing about it is that this is all new content. So when we taught the class last year, there were no books available to talk about the new CBK. So we were kind of in that gap. The good thing is now we have this book, and it's this one. You probably all have it. I don't know how many pages it is because I haven't read it all yet. 475, 400 some odd pages. So we have a new book written towards the new CBK. I think, that's just great. We'll definitely pass this thing. Well, you will. I don't have to take it. So the CBK consists of 8 domains. Here are the 8 domains: security and risk management, domain 1. For those of you who have read ahead in the book, that's chapter 2. Asset security, security engineering, communications and network security, identity and access management. That's a huge one. Identity and access management is a struggle for everybody, including the company that I'm working with in Rochester this week. Security assessment and testing, security operations, software development, security. So we're going to kind of go through in that order. We're not going to associate each individual class with a domain because they don't fall perfectly like that. But in general, if you came in class 4, we would probably be talking about security engineering somewhere, but they just don't fall perfectly. Some of the domains are much longer and have a lot more content in them. So those are the 8 domains. Preparation, bunches of ways. My favorite way of preparing for tests and tests like this, and it was the way that I did it back when I did it, is I read the book 3 times. I've never taken a class before. I read the book the first time and it doesn't make any sense to me. I have no idea what I'm reading. It's foreign concepts. It's a bunch of acronyms. It gets frustrating. But that's the intent. I just get through it. And then the second time I read the book, I'm focusing on the concepts. I'm trying to put the concepts together, but I'm not trying to master it. I'm just, okay, now I've heard this term before, so I'm not stuck on that. So now I'm trying to put these terms kind of together. And then the third time reading the book, that's when I'm focusing on the mastery and the memorization. And absent of this class, truly, if you read the book, I think, 3 times and went and took the test, you'd be fine. Honestly, it's that's my favorite way of doing it. Note cards. Some people like note cards. I know we have one of our security analysts at FRSecure who had a stack of note cards. I mean, he spent a lot of time making those note cards, but that was his method. That was what helped him to pass the exam, and of course he did. Practice tests. I do like practice tests because when I sit down to take the exam, there are going to be a bunch of questions. And one of the things I want to get kind of assimilated to is not getting stuck in the kind of the question. So I'd rather focus on the content of the question as opposed to the question itself. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's one reason why I like practice tests. The other reason why I like practice tests is it really drives home that retention. It drives home the memorization for when I get there. And then study groups are good. It's always good to have peers. You challenge each other. You ask questions and pose things in ways that others didn't consider. It's always good to establish a study group. And like I said, we'll help you with that. This program really is a tool meant to facilitate and help you study. I really do want to be myself, Rob, and any of the other analysts who participate from FRSecure. We really want to be a tool for you. So if you have questions, I mean, truly anything that we can do to help you pass this exam and start a career in information security is awesome. How to take the exam? Computer-based. When I took the exam, it was all paper-based, which was really weird. But you had to fill in those little number 2 pencil things. We had to take I took the exam. I'm from Minnesota, and I had to go to Milwaukee to take the exam. So you had to go specific places. Today, it's all CBT. You can go to any one of the Pearson VUE, I think, locations and take the exam. You don't have to wait for the next exam. You can schedule it when you want to. 250 questions, a 6-hour time limit. That gets people. They think, gosh, 6 hours. I mean, it is 6 hours, but I think the time goes by pretty fast. Most people get it done much sooner than that. Yep. So, you will, Luke. So Robert asked a question. He may have to miss the next class. Will he be able to catch the recording later or afterwards? And yes, we will make those available to anybody who misses. Get in touch with us, and we'll get it to you. 2 or sort of 4 types of questions. I think it's kind of funny that they call one of the types of questions advanced innovative questions. Really, they're scenario, drag and drop, and hotspot questions. A scenario question is you're given a certain scenario, what matches that scenario or makes the most sense in that scenario. Drag and drop is just what it is. You click, drag it, drop it in the right spots. Then hotspot is choosing the right spot. Maybe on a network diagram, they might ask you to click on the firewall or something. So you just click on it, and that's the hotspot. Used to be all just multiple choice. There's a lot of things around how to answer questions. It still holds true today from the people that I've talked to that have taken the exam recently. In the multiple choice questions, you'll almost always have 2 of the answers that are just absolutely wrong. You can eliminate them almost immediately, and then you're left with 2 that would work. You need to choose the one that's the best of those 2 and approach it like you're a security leader, like you're a security manager. Approach it like the book teaches you to do it, not necessarily the way you would do it. So that gets a little funky. 25 of the questions are experimental. This throws people off sometimes because the experimental question might be a question that covers a topic that we didn't even remotely get close to talking about, and it wasn't anywhere in the book. It wasn't anywhere in anything that you read. If you run into those questions, chalk those up as being experimental questions and don't let it throw you off. There are those on the test, every one of the tests. Methods for taking the exam: 2-pass, 3-pass method. So 2-pass is you go through it once, mark the ones that you weren't sure about, go back and check the ones that you marked, and you're done. 3-pass, I think, is a little more, I wouldn't suggest the 3-pass because what I've seen happen is you go through it once and then you start changing questions in the second and third pass. And I think there's even some scientific backing that usually the first answer that you had was the right answer. So I think the 3-pass method encourages people to change questions too much, overthink things in the exam. But it is a method that some people take, and then you could do the 1-pass method that Yoda would do. He would do the 1-pass. He wouldn't even actually touch anything probably. And you'll know right away whether you passed or failed, which is cool too. When I took the exam, you had to wait 6 weeks for them to send you the results. So you take the exam, and you're like, I felt like I did pretty good. And then as time goes on, you think more and more, oh my gosh, you start kind of freaking out. Your mind plays tricks on you. At least now you get the results right away. So that's one part of the CISSP. Everybody focuses on the exam. They think that maybe that's the hardest part of becoming a CISSP. You also have to have experience, 5 or more years, and within 2 or more of the domains. People stress about this one a little bit too, thinking that I don't have 5 years of information security experience. Well, let's say that maybe you're in IT, and one of the things that you do is you're a system administrator, and you're, creating new user accounts, you're working with group policy or whatever you're doing. Those have security implications, and those can count for security experience in one of the domains. So don't think that when you get through with the exam that I won't have the required experience. Let's see, you probably do. Oh, we did have somebody who took the exam. Okay, so there's some good advice from somebody who just took the exam if you're looking on chat, from Chris. Not enough experience. If you don't have any experience, or we really can't find ways to demonstrate the experience that you have, you get what's called an associate of ISC squared, and you keep that until you get the experience you need. You also have to agree to the code of ethics, which is, there's 5 code of ethics, 4, I can't remember now. For those of you who are ethical, that's kind of a no-brainer to abide by a code of ethics. Must be endorsed by another CISSP. You can use me. A lot of the students will send their endorsement form to me, and I'll endorse it. Usually you send that along with your resume, so that I can just validate, okay, yeah, I see how this all fits. Or find another CISSP, and that's all you need to do. You used to have to find an officer at the company to endorse your CISSP, which made it difficult going to the president. Okay, other things. So that's the CISSP, just a little bit about me, my background, kind of who I am. I am the president, co-founder of FRSecure. I've been doing security for, seems like forever, 20 years or more. I love what I do every day. I love working with people. I love solving these challenges with information security. I've learned a ton of things over the years, both good and bad, but I'm still not, I still feel like there's so much more for me to learn. Even in the areas, even in the practice areas that I profess to be an expert, it just seems like you're never ever not learning in this business, which is good. I do have quite a bit of big breach inside experience, meaning, as an example, there's a big breach. You call in Mandiant to respond to that breach, or a company like that. And then you call in somebody like me or FRSecure to fix all this stuff. So that's kind of a lot of the big breach experience that we have. A lot of that stuff is under attorney-client privilege. A lot of that stuff is whatever it is. So I can share certain things about it. I certainly learn a lot from it, and I'll try to take that into this class as much as I can. Information security evangelist. I talk about security. I don't know, speak couple dozen times a year at different conferences, and I'm preaching. This part is kind of hard because I feel like I'm preaching the same thing over and over and over again, and I sort of lost recently. It seems like I've kind of lost patience with the experts in our industry, because usually when I'm giving a presentation and I'm talking about concepts and things, I get a lot of the head nodding, but I've always gotten head nodding. What I haven't seen enough of is actually doing it. So when I talk about, asset management as being a core piece of building a security program, because I can't secure what I don't know I have, I get a lot of this. Yeah. And then you go and look at their asset management program, and it's a disaster. There is none. So I start to lose patience with some of that stuff. But, whatever. It's me. Specialties, what I kind of do today. So I'm not a penetration tester anymore. I don't work on firewalls anymore. I grew up, I started working with firewalls, but this is kind of what I do today. A lot of leadership coaching, a lot of working with CIOs and CEOs and helping them understand what they should be getting from their security program, how they can make good decisions at that level. I do a lot of risk management pieces, a lot of methodology development, and some social engineering. That's what I do today. My number for CISSP is 60-something thousand. So there were 60,000 before me, and I don't know what number we're on now. I think some big number, but that's me. Very passionate about information security. I really like doing the right thing. Sometimes that's hard. It's hard to make decisions to do the right thing, knowing that you're going to offend some people, or knowing that it's just going to be a political disaster. But that's what we do. So any questions? Go ahead and type them in. Now what I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So I talked about kind of the mentor program. I talked a little bit about the class and what the class will be. I talked about the CISSP itself. I talked about the test and how that works, and then just a little bit about me. Now we're going to kind of jump over into chapter 2 a little bit, but I'm not going to teach directly out of chapter 2. So when we go through the classes, I'm not going to read the book to you. I'm going to take concepts, I think, in the book that most people are challenged with or struggle with, and I'm kind of going to focus on those things as we go through the class. So this part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about that same presentation that I gave at the North Dakota Cybersecurity Conference. Excuse me, it's the same presentation I've given numerous times, and this is the one I get most, I think, frustrated with when I give it. But there's some very, very good fundamental things here that we can use in chapter 2, that we can use in our learning of chapter 2 stuff. And I should mention one more thing I forgot. I don't know if you guys have read the news about this industry. We have a severe shortage of good information security people in our industry. So if this is something that you're considering as a career and it seems to resonate with you, you have a really bright future ahead of you in terms of a great career path, good income. There's just a number of good things because we have such a shortage. So another reason to stick to it. So this is the presentation. I've given it a lot of times. Introduction, we're all experts. These are kind of the topics we'll talk about. We'll talk about fundamentals, the value of listening. It's hard for me to, maybe that's the reason why I can't stand teaching online, is I don't get to listen, I don't get to hear anything. But there's so much you can learn when you just sit and listen to people. I had maybe 7 meetings today with this client, and I spent most of the time just observing and listening. It's hard. I don't want to make recommendations until I really get all the inputs. So there's a huge amount of value in listening. I don't know if you've talked to many security people before. It seems to me that a lot of them aren't very good at listening. So that's why I talk about it here. Principles. So we do have a set of principles that we live by here at FRSecure. I think they'll be good principles for you to use in your own career in information security. So I'm going to go over those, and then we'll talk about some solutions and address some questions. So this is how the presentation started. That's not a picture of me. It'd be a good picture of me, though, if I was like holding the ISO standard, maybe, or NIST-SP 800-53, something like that, and preaching to you guys. Yeah, that'd be cool. So FRSecure, we are an information security consulting company. That's all we do. We don't represent any products. We're product agnostic, which is really important if we're going to make suggestions or make recommendations that concern a piece of technology in your environment. We're not trying to sell you something. We're not trying to sell you a new firewall. Your firewall really does suck. So that's why we do it. We've been in business since 2008. In the 700 plus, it's over 1,000 now. We have a lot of clients, which is really a humbling thing. When I can remember when we had one. So it's really cool to be able to help people like that. And then there's me. So if there's one thing, I'm going to minimize the chat now. I've learned in information security, it's to listen. We don't do this nearly enough. And that there's another thing that I know in information security, and I mentioned this before, is that I don't know everything. I may know more than most, but you just never know anything. And the only way, or everything, and the only way I'm going to learn more is if I first admit these two things and I take some time to actually learn some stuff and try to be better. We have a lot of people in our industry who are experts who won't admit it. They won't admit that they don't know everything. Uh, they're difficult. So one of the things we know in information security is that people are the biggest risk, right? And some of you might be doing this head nodding thing, and that's fine. I'm not going to yell in this class. So if we know that people are the most significant risk, then don't we need to be people? We need to hear people. We need to listen. We need to interact with people. And based on my experience, too many information security experts are not approachable. They're not good people. That's a problem. These are just some of the things that I have as examples. So in December, I was at the Black Hat Executive Summit, and one of the things that was interesting in that, and I really went there not to boast about how great I am and how smart the security stuff I do is. What I went there for was really to observe. I wanted to hear what information security leaders are doing, what makes them good, what makes them not so good. And, I learned a ton of things in that summit, but there were some troubling things that, I took away from that. And one of those is we're not focused on the fundamentals. People like to talk about the latest technology. People like to talk about FireEye. They like to talk about data loss prevention and intrusion prevention and whatever else is kind of the new thing. But we still consistently miss fundamental things. And one of the things I'll get to when I get there is this concept of risk. There was a great discussion that we had when we were talking about risk, and it was telling. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Some of the Fortune 500 companies, bigger companies that I've been involved with is, fundamentals. Just take the Target breach, for instance. Target had all these fancy software pieces in their environment. They had FireEye. They had, a $25, $30 million budget just for information security technology. Yet the breach still happened. Incident response was terrible. There was a lot of bad things that were broken, and many of those things were fundamental things. And one of the things that I thought was, I can't talk too much about it, but one of the things that was interesting in that is just fundamental understanding, I think, of how security actually works. And that's one example. I think you could go to many of the Fortune 500 companies and find similar pieces. And then you all heard about the Blue Cross Blue Shield breaches from last year. Whether it be Anthem, Primera, Excelis, there was some fundamental brokenness in those two. So we are missing information security fundamentals. Now the problem is with information security fundamentals, they're boring. I think people get tired of policies and training and awareness and asset management and these things that aren't really that exciting. So that's a problem, because we need to kind of make those things fun enough that people will actually do something about it and make them better. Because at the end of the day, if the information security program is broken at the core, it doesn't matter what else we do to it. It doesn't matter how good the other parts of the security program are if at the core it's broken. All you're doing is just dressing a pig. It's still a pig. So anyway. So this is a question that I always pose to these conferences, and what I'm asking. So this was funny at the last one of the conferences. I asked, who here in the class is an information security, or it was a seminar or presentation. Who in here is an information security expert? And the thing is that everybody there was an information security expert, but only one person raised his hand, and it was this guy. 2.5 times the size of me. He would have crushed me. So I didn't have, originally I was going to ask that, and I think people thought I was going to pick on them, and I sort of was going to, but then there was one guy, and he was huge, so I didn't pick on anybody. But a lot of us profess to be information security experts. So I pose this question. If we're information security experts, just give me a fundamental definition of what information security is. Because if we're going to talk about information security, we should be working from the same definition. Wouldn't you agree? It's not that my definition is so much more awesome than yours. You might have a great definition of security too, but we need to agree. We need to have a same definition of information security if we're going to work on it, if we're going to address it together. So we can always argue about that definition, whose is better, but we need to have something in common so that we can build the security program. I don't know how many people in the class have ever tried to build an information security program in an office by yourself. Not going to happen. It's going to fail, and chances are probably good that you'll be out of a job soon. So you need to interact with people. We need to have this common understanding about what security actually is if we're going to ask anybody to do something about it. So here's my definition. This is the definition I've used from the very beginning. Now, if you're already in chapter 2, you'll see some commonalities with the definition that comes out of the book. It's a good definition, in my opinion. So information security is the application of administrative, physical, and technical controls to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. That's it. I've also posed the question, tell me how this differs from privacy, and privacy is really around confidentiality of personally identifiable information. So it's a subset of information security, but you're starting now to kind of see how these puzzle pieces fit together a little bit. Most organizations way overemphasize the technical part of information security. So if you look at an information security budget, a big part of it, if not all of it, is associated, well, not all of it, because you have some personnel things, but a big piece of it is technical controls. People also overemphasize confidentiality. So if you were to ask most people about information security and ask them what their definition is, it would be focused on technical things, and it would be focused on protecting the secrecy of data or information. A lot of times these things come at the expense of administrative controls and physical controls. So administrative controls are things like policies, procedures, training and awareness. It's the people part of information security. Everybody agrees, almost everybody agrees, that people are the most significant risk. So shouldn't I have a lot of attention focused on the administrative control piece of my security program? There's challenges with that. One, it's usually pretty boring. I rarely meet anybody who enjoys reading or writing policies. People are frustrating. They're analog. They're not digital. So it's nice in a digital world where we can work with on or off. It's a 0 or a 1. It's easy to understand. People are analog. They're always on kind of this wavelength, so they're difficult. Doesn't mean that we shy away from it. It's I like difficult. I like challenges. So administrative controls happens to be an area of security that I work a lot in. So that's administrative controls. The other controls are physical controls, camera surveillance, key card access, those types of things. Also, diesel generators or power generators, HVAC systems, because those help for the availability part of physical controls. We have a saying that we use a lot at FRSecure that it doesn't really matter how good your antivirus is. It doesn't matter how good your firewall is if somebody can come in and steal your server. So physical controls, play a big part in this equation. Confidentiality, it really is about keeping information or data secret. So only people that should be able to access that information can see it, usually. Integrity is making sure the data is accurate, so that the data actually represents what it's supposed to represent. And then availability is making sure that it's available to authorized personnel when they need it. So examples, if I really lock down and focus on confidentiality, so I've locked down data just really ironclad. It's very, very tight. Confidentiality, I've really focused on that. I've done that usually at the expense of availability. So I've made it so difficult now for people to use that data. So those controls are wrong. They have to be a balance. So where I protect confidentiality, I also need to take into account the availability. So I use the same definition all the time. It's ingrained in me. You could probably ask me the same question while I'm sleeping, and I'd give you the same answer. Because everything I do comes from this definition. So find your common definition, and everything you do in information security needs to be driven from it. It's at the root. So anyway, I preached enough about that fundamental, and you'll see that in chapter 2. So chapter 2 will talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They talk about how the CIA triad is sometimes what CIA or confidentiality, integrity, and availability are referred to as. The opposite of that would be disclosure, alteration, and destruction, so DAD or DAD. So that's an easy way to remember, CIA, that's what I'm trying to protect. The opposite of that would be DAD. Weird. Fundamental. Story. Oh, do I have a story? Oh, here's a story. Oh, here's a story. I forgot that I had a story to tell. All right, big company, Fortune, I don't know, 50 maybe. We're in a deposition, I guess, and the lawyer asks the chief information security officer, give me your definition of information security and how it differs from that of privacy. So I already gave you that answer. This is my definition of information security, and how it differs from privacy is really focused on the confidentiality of personally identifiable information. So I view information security or privacy as being a subset of information security. I don't think that they're equal, regardless of what healthcare people might argue when we talk about HIPAA. That's how I see it. So in this particular case, the question was posed to this chief information security officer of a big company, and they couldn't answer it. They stumbled around. They gave some question or some answer related to access control, but it was painful for me to watch in this room. But it also made me really angry. It made me angry because as information security professionals, we have to take care of the fundamentals. It doesn't matter what else you're doing at the expense of fundamentals. So, yeah. And that also should give you some encouragement too, that as long as you stay true to fundamentals, it doesn't really matter who you go and talk to about information security. I don't have to feel intimidated. A lot of times it feels like in information security, we're all kind of involved in this pissing contest, and I don't know if that offended anybody, but like I said, I'm not politically correct. So there's this we brag about the things that we do well, but we forget about these fundamental things that are so important to building a good security program. So when you're talking to a chief information security officer at a Fortune 50 company, I don't, and you don't have to feel intimidated by their experience or by where they're coming from, because chances are very good that they're missing some of these fundamental concepts. So you can even provide good consulting to those people. So whatever. One of the most overused, so that was one fundamental that I preach over and over and over again, and I get the head nodding, and I get, well, then why? Why do we look at your security program and see such significant deficiencies in administrative controls, but technical controls look pretty good? Why are we not focusing? If we know that these are things that we need to focus on, why are we not doing it? And I know the answer, but it's still frustrating. So another one of those things is risk. Everybody's talking about risk-based information security programs, and how important it is that we understand what risk is, and risk is used everywhere. Everybody's talking about, at least in our industry, is talking about risk. Risk is overused. So there's some pictures of risk. Risk really at the end of the day, and again, this is one of those things where we can talk about your definition and my definition, and I don't want it to ever come off like my definition is the end-all be-all. It's the only definition that matters. I want to know what your definition is too, because knowing where you come from and knowing where I come from allows us to collaborate and work together to solve these big problems. So I don't want to ever discount or rip on somebody else's definition of risk. What I have an issue with is if you don't have one at all and you're in charge of it. That's a problem, but it can be fixed. So there's something else I was going to talk about risk. Whatever. If it comes to me, I'll talk about it. So this is my definition of risk. Really two things. I mean, let's simplify it. It's the likelihood of something bad happening and the impact if it did. When you talk about threats and vulnerabilities, really a vulnerability is nothing more than a weakness in a system. A threat is something that could or might exploit that weakness. That's what leads to, at the end of the day, the likelihood and impact piece. And you'll see this when we get to start talking about risk management. You'll see a bunch of equations and things that might get a little confusing, but at the end of the day, this is what risk is. It's the likelihood or probability, sometimes people use that word, the likelihood of something bad happening and the impact if it actually did happen. That's what I want to base my information security decisions on. When you build a security program or you assess a security program, you have some options. One way you can do it is what's called a control-based security program. It's a checklist. It'd be looking like a standard in our industry is ISO or NIST SP 800-53 or NIST Cybersecurity Framework or COBIT or whatever. Choose a standard. It calls out specific prescriptive controls. I look at my security program and I'm missing some of these. So a control-based security program would be the standard says I should have this, so I go and put this in. There's a lot of waste in building a security program that way, and at the end of the day, it's really not very effective. But that's one way you can build a security program. Another way you can build a security program is what's called a compliance-based security program. So the regulation, the auditor, the examiner, the regulator told me I need to do this, so I do this. So we're trusting that the examiner knows our security program better than we do. We're trusting that the examiner understands information security just in general better than we do. So we're going to take their advice and put those controls in our environment to manage security. That's another way you could do it. The best way to do it, and really the only way at the end of the day that really works, is a risk-based information security program. So one way you can do that, going back to the control-based, I could take a control-based approach, and where the control says I need to have X, I look in my environment, I don't have X, or I have a flavor of X. Excuse me, but there's a gap. Now where there's a gap, that's where I want to insert risk. I want to understand what the likelihood of something bad happening is and the impact if that bad thing happened where I have that gap. That's another way to build a security program. That's more called a risk-based information security program. And these are the types of programs you really want to build. You're starting to see regulators moving this way, which is awesome because we've been preaching it for a long time. So understand what risk is. You should be making all of your information security decisions, at least leadership decisions, on this thing called risk. So hopefully that makes sense. Fundamental, yes. Another story, sure. The Black Hat Executive Summit. So I said I was going to talk about this a little bit. This guy on the right is, I don't know if you know who he is. He's Rod Beckstrom. I'm going to drink a little bit of Monster here. It's not too late for Monster. Not even close. So that's Rod Beckstrom. Rod Beckstrom used to be the CEO and president of ICANN, which, for those techie types who understand the history of the internet, ICANN plays a really big role in the development and the management of the internet, certainly in the early days. So at the Black Hat Executive Summit, Rod Beckstrom gave a presentation on what's called value-added risk. It's a method of measuring risk in an information security program, or it's really used a lot right now or it has been for a while, in measuring financial risk. So he's taking a financial risk concept and applying it to information security, and it was a great presentation. The guy is brilliant. yeah, I have a lot of respect for Rod. So one of the things he did in his presentation was he's talking about risk, and we're talking. The people in this room are all information security executives. All of us are have or years of experience in information security. One of the things he had us do, and hopefully you guys didn't hear that burp. Rob, do you hear that burp? And I burped right there? No? Okay, so nobody's grossed out by what I just did? Right, I am a little bit grossed out by what I just did. Anyway, so Rod Beckstrom. So he gave this presentation, and part of the presentation was to have us break up into groups, into small groups, and discuss this scenario that he had given us about what's the risk in this scenario. And again, I was there really to observe. I didn't really have anything to prove. I didn't have any case that I wanted to make at this summit. I just wanted to take it in. But in my group, some very good, well-respected information security leaders were there in my group. And the risk involved with the scenario that Rod had given. And it became painfully obvious that they weren't talking about the same thing. They weren't using the same definition of risk. Some people were very focused on threats. Some people were very focused on vulnerabilities. Some people were very, very focused on outcome, so really about the impact. But at the end of the day, the discussion really wasn't about risk at my table anyway. And I know that there were other tables. So it was frustrating on one hand because we have information security leaders who I think don't understand what risk is. And so they're building programs and managing information security programs based on, I don't know what they're building them on. And I may have misinterpreted it. That happens. So it was frustrating, but then I also saw it as a great opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity to maybe step into this void and help, at least based on what I know about risk. So I went to Rod after his presentation and was just having a discussion with him. We sat down and we were having coffee, and I said, Rod, I don't think many, or at least there's certainly people in this room who didn't understand what risk is. I think we assumed that they knew what risk is because in my table they were talking about all these different things. He goes, crap, I was supposed to talk about that prior to my presentation. He says, I always open up with that, with just giving you a definition of what risk is. So this is one of those fundamentals. I think if you really wanted to have a great career in information security and you truly understood the fundamentals of what information security is and what risk is, from that kind of blossoms everything else. So that's a big thing. I think I have a question, maybe. I've been missing the questions. Yes. All right, private questions. We're good. Get to those later. All right, so fundamentals. What is information security and what is risk? Why are those definitions so important? Every one of your decisions really should be driven from these two things. You have to know what information security is. Your definition may differ from mine. That's mine. Use it if you like it. It's the best one I can think of. So, but make your own. And then everything you do around security needs to be driven from that. And then build a risk-based security program. Everything, at the end of the day, in order for me to demonstrate that there's any value in the controls that I'm proposing, I need to be able to tie that to risk. You won't be able to tie it necessarily quantitatively to dollar amounts. When we talk about the types of risk assessments, we'll talk about quantitative and qualitative and what the difference is. But I do need to, it helps in the measurement and it helps in justification for what I do. So the value of listening, let me tell you just a little bit about this. This is, again, coming from the presentation that I give, often. One of the things that we do to try to keep us in check at FRSecure is we establish this customer advisory board. And in that customer advisory board, they give us input, they give us feedback, they tell us where we're missing the mark, they tell us where we're nailing it. It's a great opportunity for us just to sit back and listen. And sometimes the discussion, like the last customer advisory board, the discussion went off on service desk management, and it just kind of stayed there for a while. And we wanted to talk about other things, but that's what they wanted to talk about. So it's a great time for us to really kind of figure out what we're doing, and we value it highly. And the humble part comes when you hear the things that you don't want to hear. So try to keep that to a minimum. So we posed 2 questions, though, in one of our recent customer advisory boards, and we wrote a blog post about this too, but we posed 2 questions to them. We said, 1, what's your greatest frustration with respect to information security? And 2, what's your greatest challenge? So very similar questions, but completely different, I think. And the reason why we want to know, if we know that people are our most significant risk, if we know that administrative controls are very important and usually not emphasized well, we need to know, what's your biggest frustration? What's your biggest challenge? And so we posed these questions, and here's some of the things we got back. So greatest frustrations, lack of common information security understanding. Going back to our definition of what security is, that's not a shared thing. If you ask, and I would ask you to ask this too, of people you know in information security, or ask of business leaders and executives or anybody. Ask your wife or husband, hey, what do you think information security is? And listen, see what you get for an answer. It's important too, because even if I ask, Johnny in customer service, hey, what's your definition of information security? If he has something that's just wildly different than what we're doing, that's pretty telling that we're not educating well. We're not getting to him for some reason. So ask anybody and see what you get. It's kind of fun. Different interpretations of different information security regulations and standards. We're a very regulated industry, very compliance driven. When people don't really know what to do, they have a tendency to not do anything until they're told what to do. So that's kind of what we have in a lot of parts of our industry. Big regulations and standards that we use, reference, get beat over the head with. HIPAA is a big one in healthcare, GLBA and derivatives from the FFIEC, in banking and finance and what have you. PCI compliance, FINRA. I mean, there's just so many different regulations and standards. If you have any kind of sensitive information in bulk, chances are there's a regulation or a standard that you have to comply with. There's different interpretations. So as an example, I might have an examiner or a regulator. So I get HIPAA, right? And it says that I need to do these things. So I interpret that these things are this, so I'd go and do this. The OCR, who enforces HIPAA, they send an auditor out and do an audit, and they interpret it differently than I did. So they're going to find all these things that I need to fix, and so I go and fix those things. And then I wait for the next audit, and then the next audit comes, and I get a different auditor from the OCR, but a different auditor who has a different interpretation. That gets very frustrating very quickly, because a lot of those things that they'll be making recommendations for might be strategic things that I can't just change overnight. That's very frustrating for people. Number 3, lack of education for practitioners and executive management. I preach all the time because I'm always trying to educate. There's a lack of education. There's a lack of good security people out there, and we talked about that. Constantly changing priorities based on outside influences. Sometimes those outside influences come in the form of regulations, laws, auditors. Sometimes it comes in the form of big company vendor risk management personnel. So if you're a smaller company and you're doing business with a big company, they want to know what your security program looks like so that they can measure the risk in doing business with you. That's going to bring a different set of priorities for you. That's frustrating for our customers. And I assume that these are frustrations that are shared with most organizations. The core frustration that kind of came out of this that we discussed and I think agreed with, if we were to summarize all of the frustrations, it was that we're all speaking different languages. Brings us back to our definition of information security. What is the language we're going to speak? We have to have definitions for it. So that's core frustration, number one. Greatest challenges: education training for executives, IT personnel, users. I don't know if you guys get caught up in this, but a lot of executives aren't information security experts, nor are they kind of supposed to be, but there are some fundamental things that they need to be aware of and need to be constantly aware of. At the end of the day, the liability lies with them. They're the ones who are responsible for protecting assets. So there has to be something that we're doing for them, and that's a challenge for our customers. Management commitment to continuous improvement. People like to look at security, and I get caught up in it too. And people who are here from FRSecure will probably relate to this. I have a tendency to get very transactional sometimes as opposed to relational. Transactional meaning I have an information security project. I start it, I complete it, I'm done. As opposed to I start it, I complete it, now what? We have to have this continuous improvement in our information security. As soon as you stop continually improving, then you're not improving. You're then they won't. There was one company, a big healthcare company, where we delivered the results of their information security assessment. Their score actually went down from a 2014 assessment to one that was recently completed. And so what I heard was, well, we invested all this money, all this time, all this effort in information security, and our score went down. So this is an information security assessment that we did. What's the use? Why do we even continue to do this? Why don't we just stop doing security? I was like, how do you stop doing security? You really don't have an option. You can't stop doing security. You have to continually improve. So if the score went down, there are factors, there are reasons for that. Dig in on what those reasons are, but stay focused on that continual improvement. Number 3, obtaining necessary resources. So trying to get budget, trying to get the right people on board is a challenge for our customers. A lot of this can be tied back to the education piece. I can get resources if they understand why I need them. Sometimes I have trouble making that case because of their lack of understanding, or maybe my lack of collaboration. And then measuring information security is a huge challenge. And I have a saying that we use that I can't manage something that I can't measure. So I need to be able to measure where my security program is at. If I implement a specific control, does that reduce risk? And if so, by how much? And if I'm making a decision on this control versus that control, which one am I going to get a better return on? Which one reduces risk the most at the least cost? I mean, there's just a number of things that go into those discussions. At the end of the day, I need to measure. I have to determine what the metrics are going to be for measuring my security program, and I need to be consistent in those measurements, and I need to communicate those. You'll find that if I address number 4 fairly well, number 3 becomes a lot easier. So if I do have good information security metrics, it makes it easier for me to get budget, because I can demonstrate to executive management that, hey, you invest $150,000 here, you reduce risk by this much versus, kind of where we're talking about spending $500,000 over here to kind of reduce this much. This is a much wiser investment. It makes it easier. So anyway, frustrations, if we were to sum it up, I think after discussion around these challenges, the second problem was that if we don't know how to fix stuff. So if we're speaking the same languages and we fix that problem, and we were to tell you, or you were to find that you have these 10 things that you need to do, there's a big challenge in actually fixing those things. So that's what we focus on. So 2 problems summed up by listening. Number 1, we're speaking different languages for the same topic. And 2, we don't know how to fix the issues, even if we knew about them. And that's common. You take asset management. That's just one I'm kind of picking on tonight. If I tell you that you can't secure what you don't know you have, so asset management is fundamental and it's really important. We need to focus on it. We need to account for the entire asset management lifecycle from acquisition all the way to disposition, where assets go, how they're tracked. Change control needs to be integrated with that, access control. All these things need to happen to have a very robust, good, solid asset management program. Now go do it. People struggle with that. And even if they did know how to do it, it's a lot of work. And I don't know if you know, people are lazy sometimes, so they take shortcuts. They don't want to do it the right way because it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So it's just another challenge. I'm kind of a Debbie Downer today. Hopefully there's nobody in the class named Debbie. That would be my political correctness again. But these are good things for us to know. And I think they're good foundational concepts as we drive into the CISSP class, where we're going to start digging into what truly is an information security program. What are these fundamental things that, and how do I do it? Security operations, risk management. So this is, I think, a good segue and introduction into that. I didn't want to hit too hard on things that we have to memorize. I think if you were to memorize 2 things out of tonight, what's the definition of information security? Use mine unless you have a better one. And what's my definition of risk? So different languages, the same topic. Define and live by your definition of information security, just like I said. This is also something that is really going to help you build a solid security program. Define this, live by it, communicate it, refer to it. This will be kind of your mission statement, sort of, for building your security program. Everything needs to be driven by it. If I consistently refer to that with executive management, they're going to get it, and they're going to demand answers around it. So number 1, do that. Number 2, define and live by your definition of risk. If you do manage risk well, you'll automatically be compliant with regulations. So if a regulator asks me, and I know maybe I'm painting a rosy picture, but if a regulator asks me or an examiner asks me, hey, where's this control? And I can make a good risk-based case for why I don't have that control, I'm probably going to be okay. At least if the examiner or the regulator understands security and understands risk, which might be another opportunity. You'll be able to make good decisions and build a security program that works for you. So out of all these things, and this is what we at FRSecure, we have these 10 things printed out for everybody. They're pegged on people's desks. These are things that we keep in mind all the time as we're building security programs and working in information security. Number 1, a business is in business to make money. People will not argue with that. So when we're looking at security controls, or we're devising security controls, if it restricts the ability for a company to make money, then it's the wrong control. So sometimes we have to be creative in the controls that we make. This is also important for us and you'll see this in the CISSP when we get there. Our information security program needs to align with the mission and objectives of the business. It can't be counter to that. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're fighting this this never-ending battle. And if it was a race and a CEO had a decision to make, and the CEO was either we're going to make more money or we're going to get security right, what decision do you think they're going to make? And you only have so much capital when you go to a CEO or you go to a board of directors. It only gets to happen so many times before they're just not going to invite you anymore. And then you end up being out of a job. So keep that in mind. Business is in business to make money. Information security is a business issue. It's not an IT issue. It's frustrating to see that most information security programs report up through an IT function. It would be nice if it stood on its own. It does require that kind of visibility, and you're seeing that more and more. 20 years ago, it was unheard of to have an information security officer or chief information security officer who reported to the CEO. That's more common today. So people, I think, are starting to get it. Information security is certainly a business issue. It has IT components. IT is a big part of it, potentially, but it's a business issue. If I put information security and IT under the same umbrella, and also it reports up to, let's say, the CIO. The CIO needs to go get budget. The CIO needs to make business cases for whatever they need to. Oftentimes, the CIO is going to be held accountable to making sure that things are available. So you have this availability issue, and they like new shiny objects and new features that make business move more. So if I take security and put that into that same mix, well, security is sometimes gets a bad rap. It's viewed as something that's a cost center. It gets viewed as something that doesn't drive the business forward. It gets caught as, or thought of as something that's counter to IT. So when one part gets more emphasis than the other, and it's usually IT. So if we treat it like a technology issue, it doesn't work well as well. Information security is fun, so we're always trying to look for opportunities to make information security fun. We need to keep that in mind. Certainly if we understand that people are the most significant risk, which is number 4, people like to participate in fun. I think it's hard to get people to participate in security sometimes because it's dry. I don't know if any of you right now, so we still have, I don't know if any of you are kind of drowsing off right now, maybe starting to do this head nodding thing like this is not fun. We're trying. It is. We're supposed to try to make it fun, so find ways to make it fun. People are the biggest risk. It's a no-brainer, but we forget about it. Compliant and secure are 2 different things. I kind of touched on that. Compliant is really doing what you've been told to do. Secure, in my definition, is administrative, physical and technical controls to protect confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data based on risk. That would be my secure definition. Totally different than compliant. So don't get the 2 mixed up. No common sense in information security. So what's common sense to me, and this is important for me to keep in mind, and it goes right along with the listening piece. When I look at a breach or I look at something bad that somebody's doing, or I'm doing an assessment, and I look at a control and I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you dense? I don't say that to them, but I'm thinking this, like, how could this be common sense for you? Well, they have different perspectives, different education, different experience. So what's common sense to me is not going to be common sense to everybody, and vice versa. So this is where you're going to have to go the extra mile and explain yourself. Explain why this control is so important, or explain why we do things this way versus the way you want to do things. Secure is relative, so this is driving home the point that information security, there's no such thing as secure, meaning we can't prevent all breaches. There's always going to be some level of risk. You can't eliminate it. You can only manage it. So it's a measurement. It has to be measured. So I may be more secure today than I was yesterday. To what degree, that's debatable. But I'm never truly preventing all breaches and being secure in the definition of some people. Information security should drive business. It doesn't have to always be a cost center. So look for areas of opportunity where you can implement a security program or a control to make the business more money if possible. Look for ways that you can increase efficiency in the business by using and leveraging information security. We have a lot of companies, a lot of customers who tout the security that they've implemented to get more customers. So, if you've made some security achievement, we'll use that. Communicate that to your customers. Like, hey, you can trust me more with your money or your information than you can, our competition, because we take this stuff seriously. And then I've gotten the question before, well, if I tout my information security, don't I make myself a target? That's kind of the old school way of the way security worked. There's still some of it that happens. We used to, back in the hacker culture when things were different, hackers would hack for bragging rights. So if I touted my information security, yes, I made myself a target because it's a challenge now. And I'm going to hack you, or I'm going to compromise something, and then I'm going to brag about it, tell my friends, and they're going to be impressed. And that's what we used to do. Today, it's all driven by money. So the focus is different. So if I tout my information security controls, there are some that might view that as a challenge, but those aren't the people I'm usually concerned about anyway. So tout it. Feel free. You're not making yourself more of a target, in my opinion. Information security is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So as you look through the CISSP study guide, as we talk through the rest of this class, as we look at case studies and information security programs in other organizations, don't expect the same controls that have been implemented at Wells Fargo to be the controls that work in your company. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And that's important. Just because a company has specific controls that are designed a specific way doesn't mean you should. Build a security program for your company. And the only way you can do that really is to measure risk. So this also drives us away from that control-based security program. And then there's no easy button. You know, information security is a lot of work. You kind of have to be passionate about it. Don't look for an easy button. People still do it. People are still doing it. That's why we see, you know, technologies getting bought left and right, ineffective technologies that don't work, because people are always looking for that easy button. They don't want to have to build, put in the effort to build a really solid security program. So if you find passion in that and you can do that, you'll go a really long way in this industry. How to fix the issues. So I mentioned all these things that I've talked about tonight, and still got so much time. I should talk slower. So the second part, we don't know how to fix all the issues. We don't know how to fix the issues. If I were to start from scratch and I were to build a security program, this is where I would go. This is where I would start. I would start with number one, management commitment. I would get executive management bought in on what it is we need to do and how we're going to do it, what they can hold me accountable to as their chief information security officer, and what I can hold them accountable to as executive management. We need to either get all in on this thing, or let's not even go through the effort. Let's just pretend still. A lot of times we're walking into organizations where we have to kind of revisit a lot of these or all these. So either you're in or you're not. Now, I had a great discussion this morning with the CIO of this big company I'm working with in Rochester, and he's like, "Man, I'm all in." And he was really fired up. I think maybe a little too much. He was talking about firing people and stuff. You know, I'm not saying that yet. Maybe I have examples of places that have gone that far and really taken it that seriously, but that really does affect your culture of your organization. So that can really detract from making the money part. So management commitment, number one, that it has to start there. Number two, asset management. I can't secure what I don't know I have. I need to build a good asset management program that's going to be at the core of a lot of these other things that I'm going to build into my security program. Asset management is number one. Then things that kind of get integrated with that, access control. So who's going to have access to these things? Because I can't secure what I can't control. So asset management, I know what I need to secure. Number two, I need to start controlling access to those assets, changes to those assets. That would be number four. And then measure everything. This is where I would start. And then there's a bunch of other pieces that kind of go from that. So if you happen to be in a situation where you're building a security program, this is where I would go. I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bam. This will take you forever, maybe. Kind of depends. But like I said, it's continuous, right? So get these things in place. So as you build, implement, manage, improve your security program, don't forget to listen. Some people will be impressed with your expertise and your intelligence, but at the end of the day, if you kind of go too far, you end up being kind of ineffective, and you defeat yourself. So it's okay to admit that you don't know everything. I love the group of people that I get to work with every day at FRSecure because I constantly learn things from these guys. We have about a dozen analysts today, about 28 employees, and then we have a great sales staff and a great marketing staff. Rob is putting this thing on for us here, so thank you, Rob. We have this great company, but from the analyst perspective, I'm always learning from these guys and gals, whether it be a PCI thing or it be, just today, one of our analysts, Stefan, was really working on this new banking methodology for doing risk assessments at the same time, being really tied in well with IT controls. You read the stuff that he's creating, it's like, man, that's brilliant. And so it's okay to admit I don't know everything. I learn from others a lot. So, and we're back. So we're bringing it back now. We covered a lot today. We covered kind of an intro to just a recap. We covered an intro to the mentor program. We talked about, what to expect in future classes in terms of the format. It won't follow the same as today. So on Thursday, we're going to dig in. We're going to start talking about Chapter 2. We talked about what the CISSP is. We talked about the exam and what to expect when we get there. And then we talked about, these information security fundamentals that are, I think, utterly important. And like I said before, we have 70-ish people online. If any of you have a better or a different or take exception to anything that was in the slides or talked about today, I'd love to hear it, because I do like questions. I do like challenges. I do like when we work off of each other like that. So I look forward to those things. Homework on Thursday, so that's 2 days. Today's the 26th. It's coming fast. Please read Chapter 2, Domain 1. It is 63 pages. If you don't get through it all, that's okay. Get through as much as you can, because after that, we've got a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then we're back Monday, whatever, Tuesday. And we'll talk about, we'll recap. But we're going to dig in now. We're going to dig right into Chapter 2. I'm not going to read it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out key concepts, and we're going to have discussions about those things. I'm looking forward to questions that you have in the content of Chapter 2 as well. But it should be a good class on Thursday. Today is not Thursday, it's Tuesday. So any questions? We have time. We have what was the 5th step and how to fix the issues. Well, let's go back and see. Oh, geez. Measure. So one of the questions was, what was the 5th step? So measure, look for metrics. This is a challenge for a lot of people in trying to figure out how do I measure? Pick something, pick anything. I usually, I'll start with something that's easy to measure sometimes. So sometimes, let's talk about vulnerability management. We know that a lot of companies don't do a very good job at vulnerability management. So, and the reason why that's a good place to start is because I get this thing called the CVSS score, which is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. In all of your good vulnerability scanning solutions will scan for and score against this Common Vulnerability Scoring System. So if you've never seen it, just Google CVSS. Most people are using version 2, but there's a version 3 now. So if I just Google CVSS, there's a scoring system. So high severity vulnerabilities are rated at 10. Critical severity vulnerabilities are rated at 10. Well, actually, I round them off. So I take criticals as 10s. I take highs as 8. I take moderates or mediums as 5, and lows I take as a 2. Whatever you decide to attach to those classifications for vulnerabilities. But do a vulnerability scan as just an introduction in how to measure stuff. And what you'll get is you'll get all these vulnerabilities, and they'll all be tied to CVSS scores. And then just add them all up. So I'm going to have a cumulative CVSS value or score. And then the next time I do a vulnerability scan, what's the delta? Did it get better? Did it get worse? That's very basic, and it's a good place to start. But just taking that one example to the next level, well, let's do average CISSP score per host as a measurement that I'm going to continually track. And then maybe I'll take average number of critical and high severity vulnerabilities per host, and I'm going to use that to track. And then I'm going to, so you can start kind of getting measurements and metrics that are relevant to you, that are going to make sense to you as you manage your security program. But that's a good place to kind of just start it because it's kind of already done. Yeah, you can get creative and create all kinds of wacky measurements. At the end of the day, they're all good because they measure. So that's number 5. There was another question. So some of these are questions that were sent to me privately because I think maybe we got a bunch of people who are shy today. I don't know. Another question was, and I'm not going to say who's asking the question, so you don't have to worry. What kind of people make up your cab? Is it pros, C-levels? It's a mix of that. Or IS pros or C-levels. It's a mix. We have, a couple C-level people are in there. Some very, very seasoned IT or IS, IT pros and information security pros. We have some long-term customers in there. It's kind of a mix. We want it to be a mix. And it's a 1-year term in the client or the customer advisory board. So they'll be, I think, terming out at the end of maybe third quarter. I can't remember. John Anderson, our vice president of sales, can speak to that. But then we'll be assembling another one. So if there are people who are interested in being on our customer advisory board, we'd love to entertain the idea. It's really cool. One person took the exam, and I'm not going to say, oh no, Chris, you already said that. You said that to everyone anyway, so. We had one question. Privately, information security is the application of administrative, physical, and technical controls to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. That is absolutely true. All right. Do I run into trouble? So do you run into trouble while with securing while staying compliant? No. Well, no, shouldn't. I think my approach to compliance is that compliance is driven from, when you're talking about security, if my approach is that if I am secure, or if I'm running a good risk-based security program, I will automatically be compliant. And there's plenty of evidence to support that. So it doesn't mean that an examiner or a regulator won't take exception and say, well, okay, that's fine that you have this risk justification on why you're not putting this control in place, but I want you to do it anyway. You'll have that. It's kind of an unreasonable request if we've already assessed the risk and it's not significant. But okay, at the end of the day, we have to comply with the law. But I never really run into trouble with that. With them being too head buddy. Another question. Asset management is a broad term. It includes people, IT assets, physical things. How do you go about documenting all of the assets? That's a great question. So we break assets into kind of 3 different types. We take physical assets, software assets, and data assets. To simplify things, we can include, I suppose, people or other things. So physical servers, physical hardware type things, infrastructure, switches, routers, all those things that are things. And physical is just things that you can touch. So we have a physical asset inventory. A lot of organizations do a pretty good job of physical asset inventory. The next is kind of software asset inventory. So what software do I have and where is it? So this is where things get a little bit fuzzier. I may have, I don't know. The organization I'm working with right now is having kind of this struggle. I have a bunch of these applications, and a bunch of these applications are critical applications in my environment. And they're being audited against those by numerous external and internal. So I have an internal audit function, and all these things are going on. And so they want help kind of preparing for these audits. And so the first thing I asked was, okay, give me a list of these applications. And they didn't have a list of the applications. Well, I'm like, well, I don't know how we got to start there. We have to know what the applications are. And then from there, we have to assign who are the owners of these applications. So who's responsible for them? And then we need to define who are the IT assets or the IT personnel who are responsible for managing it. So that's a custodian role, an owner, custodian, and then users. But anyway, to get back to your question, yes, asset management is a very broad term. It needs to be defined in every organization. It's a little bit different in every organization. So define what your asset management is going to be. If you don't have that, we start with hardware, physical, so hardware, software, and data assets, and then begin working on that. That's a good question. Would I say the compliance is basically a minimum standard? There's two, I think, minimum standards. One is compliance, and the other is what this thing called due care. And we'll talk about that when we get to the CISSP. But if I haven't exercised due care in the management of my company or the management of my assets or our assets, if I haven't met that bar, then anything below that is considered negligence. And then I have some legal issues, civil legal issues. So you've got different types of minimum standards. You have compliance from so it's a minimum set of requirements for compliance. So it's a minimum standard. But then I've also got if something bad happens and I haven't exercised due care, well, then I can be held liable because I'm negligent. So that's another minimum standard. So I guess it depends on who you're talking to about what a minimum standard is and what the context is. It's hard to figure out what truly a minimum standard is. One of the questions is, the difficulty I have in managing risk is understanding the likelihood of a vulnerability occurring. I don't have a crystal ball. So that's a good point. So the vulnerability, and just to correct terms a little bit, the vulnerability is a weakness. So a vulnerability doesn't occur necessarily. There are things that have to compromise vulnerabilities, and those are called threats. So I have these vulnerabilities in my environment, and the threats are kind of the part that I need to have that crystal ball a little bit. The likelihood of this threat compromising this vulnerability is what? There's a lot of things that go into that. So the biggest hang up on that is I won't be able to quantify that. Meaning I won't be able to put a hard dollar value to it. I won't be able to put a certainty to it. The best I can do is put an estimation around it. So when managing risk, it's called a qualitative risk assessment. So I've got a vulnerability. I know that I've got these threats that could potentially compromise this vulnerability. In general, the higher the likelihood of something, the impact is usually lower. And conversely, the lower likelihood events are usually higher impact. So it doesn't really matter which event you end up choosing because they kind of balance out normally. And we'll get to some examples in the book too. So you use qualitative values. So a qualitative value is I'm going to rate likelihood on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being it's not likely to happen at all, probably never happen. 5 is it's like going to happen probably tomorrow if I don't do something, or maybe it's happening now. And then impacts I'm going to rate on that same scale, 1 to 5. And this gets us into our measurement thing too, by the way. So 1 is like it's no impact at all. 5 is catastrophic. I don't even know how we'd be able to stay in business. So just put these values, put definitions to what those values are, and then in your risk management process, assign these qualitative values to these vulnerabilities and threats. Yeah, and you'll start out being, truly when you start doing risk assessments, it's very cumbersome. It feels very imperfect. It feels almost embarrassing to do it, sometimes because you just know that there's not really any solid data behind this risk assessment I'm doing. And that's okay, because if you stick with it and if you treat this as a continuous thing, the next time you do a risk assessment, it's a little bit better than the last one you did. And then the next time you do it, it's a little bit better. And then you end up having this really solid risk management program that started out being really bad. And we see that in our own work too, by the way. At FRSecure, we look at our current version of our assessment that we do today is version 5. It's internally developed. We're actually going through a patent, and it's this whole big thing. So we're on version 5. I look back when we were filing the patent for the version 5, I was looking back on the version 1 reports, and it was embarrassing. I was like, geez, I can't believe people paid for that. But at the time, that was the way. So I guess the point I'm making is, don't try to be perfect in your risk assessment. Assign values, make them qualitative, and just go with it. And you'll figure out the rest later. Another question, does FRSecure have standards when it comes to grading risk assessments? How would you define an ideal business? What grade would you consider acceptable? Good questions. We do have standards. We reference external standards and we reference our own internal standards. We have to do that because if I give you an assessment and say, I graded it, so we score everything. For those of you who've been through an assessment with us, we score everything on a value from 300 to 850. And it's, when you think of that, oh my gosh, it's like a credit score. Yeah, and that's on purpose because we need to get executive management to understand what we're talking about. So it goes to that communication thing. So we have to have standards that we reference externally so that if I give you a score of, say, 650, and you say, well, what's that based on? Is that just your opinion? No, here are the standards that we kind of reference and base it on. So we use the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's kind of the latest and greatest, and we like it because it's super flexible. People get frustrated with it because it's not prescriptive. But in that same standard are other standards that are referenced. NIST Special Publication 800-53 is referenced. ISO 27000 is referenced. The critical security controls from CIS are referenced. COBIT is referenced. It's a really good external standard. So then we have our own internal standards. So internal standards are, and we get asked about this a lot. So if we say that your score is a 660, well, how did you calculate that? What is the likelihood value and impact values that you use, and how did you manipulate them? And so that's where our internal standards come, and how we do that. So we do have standards when we come to grading risk assessments, absolutely. And it's also meant to be, like if I did your assessment and one of our other analysts did your assessment, the scores should be the same or within plus or minus 5%, some small percent. Because that makes it then objective versus subjective, which is going to be really important if we're going to compare you against somebody else. That score has to be objective. So how would you define an ideal business? I would define an ideal business as an organization that takes, from a security perspective, an organization that takes information security seriously from the top down and practices what they preach. There are a number of organizations that I know of that do that. They consistently measure their security program. They invest wisely in their information security controls. They justify those things on risk. Executive management and the board of directors are regularly involved in making decisions around information security. They don't just want to hear the good things. They want to hear the bad things too. Because you'll see that in a lot of organizations, by the time it gets up to executive management, hey, everything's great. Because if I don't say everything's great, well, then you're going to question me as your chief information security officer. Am I actually doing my job right? So that's an ideal business. I think that just has this information security culture about them. And in the grading, so the last question was, what grade would you consider acceptable? We score on this grading scale of 300 to 850. Just about every control that we assess in our normal assessments is based on that. The acceptable level begins at 660 on that scale. You'll never, just like a credit score, you'll never get to 850. It's impossible for you to do that. But you actually can get down to 300. We have some organizations that portions of their security program actually didn't even make it onto the scale. So they didn't even get to that 300 level. So that kind of gives you, I guess, maybe some insight. Hopefully I answered your question about those things. Hi, Evan. Without tying names and positions. Ooh, that means I'm supposed to say no. Do you think it would be possible to find out? Okay, yep. So this is just a question about collaboration and sharing information amongst each other in the group and stuff like that. We are going to take on that. This is a great suggestion. So the suggestion is find out what types of people are in the group. Is it mostly IT managers? Who is kind of new to information security? Who's an information security expert who's just here for whatever reason, years of experience, that kind of thing. So I think, Rob, if we could take this as a takeaway, because I think it'd be valuable, maybe we could do a survey of, the attendees in the class and kind of get, and then we can discuss as the class, as a class, and whether we can share that information and maybe marry up the right people for study groups. We'll talk about that. That's good. With FRSecure's risk assessment practice, where do your clients generally rate? Between 300 and 850. I think the average, last time I checked, is 579, I think. I am not positive on that, but I think 579 seems like it's about right. We just had a record low score on administrative controls. So we do know that thing, those things. We don't know details. We do live by what we preach. So, one of the concepts that we'll talk about in the CISSP is this need to know principle. So we may have an analyst who's working on a specific part, on a specific client. If I'm not working on that client, then I have no need to know what their score is. So we generally aggregate scores and averages. But I'd say 579 seems like it rings a bell. What industry is the most secure in your opinion? That's a good one. I'd say banking, probably. Because banking is, even though there's deficiencies in the way banking approaches information security in general, they're maybe 3 to 5 years ahead of the other industries in terms of security. So healthcare is lagging, significantly behind them as an industry. Banking seems to have the most because they understand risk. They work with risk all the time, every day, in the financial decisions that they make. And I think you're starting to see that more in the information security controls. That it was very much compliance driven and control based, it seemed. But their banking is doing well. They have the one thing everybody wants too. They have money. And if this is a money driven thing, then they're going to be the ones that are going to be targeted the most. So good question, and Devin, good answer. I agree with that. It's banking. I was just trying to think if government not good, education not good, healthcare not good, retail not good. It's got to be banking. All right, any other questions? We're at 8:50. Hopefully you guys found value in tonight. I'm excited to get to know some of you. Some of you I will get to know, as we go through the class, and some of you more quieter folk. I may never end up meeting face to face, but hopefully we have a good time as we get through this stuff. We all become better security people, and it'll be fun. Any other questions before I wrap it up? All right, going once. Will I be at Secure 360? I will not. I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have time to get to Secure 360 this year. I will be at Black Hat. So if you do make it out to Vegas this year, you'll see me there. Oh, so, okay. We'll have to hook up. We should hook up, and at least I'll buy you. I don't drink, but I can buy you a drink if you do. All right. Well, that's all I got. Have a great DEF CON. Yes, I might stay a little bit longer past Black Hat to do some DEF CON stuff. We're actually going to Black Hat and DEF CON this year with a different focus. Before it was just a consumer. I think we're going now this year with more of a focus on how do we plan for being a contributor in 2017. So it'll be a lot of fun this year, just kind of figuring out, can we help the industry? Because that is our biggest conference. Is there something we can do to help the industry move forward? So anyway, that's all I got. You guys have a great night. It's 10 o'clock my time almost, so it's bedtime. Long day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on Thursday. Thursday will also be online. If you have additional questions, email Rob, or you can email me. If you want the content, email me, email Rob. Read Chapter 2. That's what we're going to talk about. And that's it. So enjoy the night, guys. Thank you so much.